Welcome to the Built World Around You, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping residential and commercial construction, as well as all the industries connected to it. Each week, we sit down with thought leaders, rising stars, and real problem solvers tackling today's toughest challenges. From job site breakthroughs to boardroom strategies, we're here to share the lessons, the struggles, and the success stories that are a part of tomorrow's world being built right now. So grab your hard hat, sharpen your pencil, and let's get to work. Welcome to the Built World Around You. I'm your host, Bobby Thompson, president of Thompson Group Ventures. And today I'm very excited to have on the show Dominic Butchko. He's the Director of Governmental Relations at the Maryland Association of Counties. And for those of you who didn't know what that was or how that was coming to be, we're going to dive into all of that today. Can't wait to have a conversation with him. He's a wealth of knowledge. So get excited for Dom. Dominic, how are you?
I'm doing good, Bobby. I gotta say, I love your intro song and that whole beat and hype. That is first class, my friend.
Thank you. I cannot take credit. Georgie Pats, the producer, is who created that for me. So shout out to Georgie Pats.
Awesome.
So I'm excited that you like it, though. So Dom, for those of you who don't know you or haven't met you, tell us who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, so Dom Butchko, Director of Intergovernmental Relations for MACO, or Maryland Association of Counties. We represent all 24 counties across the state. Unlike some states, we're very lucky where we have all of our counties a part of our association. And so I serve on the policy team along with a number of other really talented and really cool folks. And my portfolio in particular includes all of the non-controversial stuff like land use, housing, energy, environment, infrastructure. Very easy, no heartburn ever portfolio.
There's never a disagreement in any of those things, ever.
No. Always big old bear hugs.
So let me ask you this. How does one become a member of the Association of Counties? How does that work?
Yeah, so very good question. If you are a county employee or if you are a county elected official, congratulations, you're already a member. You don't have to sign up. And then internally, we have a number of groups kind of based on what your profession is. So we have a whole engineers affiliate, a planners affiliate for land use. We have a ton of networking groups and other groups for our elected officials. Also, when the rubber really meets the road, we have a board and a legislative committee where counties actually get to vote and debate policy and decide kind of the position of the association.
That's fantastic. So I guess the big, hairy, audacious goals of the state meet that board, and essentially all of the representatives get to discuss their constituents' views, and how that, as an elected official, what that means to their specific county. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. So Maryland is actually really unique where counties are really powerful and influential in how we actually kind of move and implement public policy. A lot of state policy in Maryland is implemented at the local level. And so there's a ton of conversations in Annapolis all the time on, you'll hear in a hearing, where's MACO on this bill? Because X policy will probably kind of flow through one of our departments and will be our responsibility.
That's fantastic. So when you're looking at legislative session, and a lot of the viewers and some of the listeners out there are not in the Maryland market, right? So they're looking at it and they're hearing these things that are very Maryland centric. One of the unique things that Maryland has, and we talked about it with Delegate Corman, is that it's only a 90-day legislative session.
Yeah, it's wild. So I am not from Maryland. I'm actually from up north, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the hands down best Commonwealth, if I can say. But compared to just above the Mason-Dixon line, Maryland is really different. It's a 90-day legislative session, and unlike some other states that also have part-time legislatures, it's a strict 90 days. It's 90 days, period. Very few times will you have an exception, and there's not a lot of special sessions either, again, only in very kind of narrow circumstances. So if you don't get it done by sine die, it's dead, and that's it's a release, but it's also a lot of stress.
Yeah, I can only imagine there's a benefit to that, right? Is that things just don't linger on because you have that deadline. But also you're trying to get a lot of things done in a very short period of time. So hats off to the elected officials and the folks over at Mako who are doing the heavy lift on that. If you had to say, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing or hearing in this legislative session that's coming up?
So I think that like the biggest one, just to get it out of the way, is housing policy.
Mm.
2024 was roughly like the session of housing. We had the Housing Production and Affordability Act. MAKO made housing one of our top four legislative initiatives in 24. 25, there was more of a focus on energy, but then towards the end of session, it became really intensely focused on housing. I think that was a little bit of a surprise for some of us. We thought maybe it would tone down in 25. It actually, towards the end, was the opposite. It ramped up. And then,
Right.
and then that very much set the stage for the interim that we're getting through right now, and then the 2026 legislative session. We know the governor is going to come with at least two big housing bills, just like he did in prior years. Mako, we're going to have a housing package, one that we're affectionately right now calling Bambi, or Build Affordably in My Backyard. We're trying really hard to kind of be very productive stakeholders there. And then we know folks like MBIA and the industry are kind of debating a number of things too. And so housing will really be probably the keynote issue of this coming session.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And I appreciate Mako's approach to partnering with thought leaders ahead of session. I know personally my interaction with you and the Mako board and those members has been very inspiring to know that it's really about how do we get through this together and with a joint understanding, both from DHCD, the state opinion, the MBIA association opinion, and then the Mako opinion. We are all trying to do the best for the environment that we live in. And I think that that synergistic effort is going to lead to a lot of success this session. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. And to kind of to go back to what we were talking about before with the 90-day legislative session, I think if like folks who aren't in the political world, that's a little bit of a misnomer. So like for us,
Mm.
session ends in April. We started ramping up our efforts on housing in like late May. And so there's maybe like 30 days ish where you get to breathe. And
Right.
then we've been like working internally because we have 24 counties, 24 different sets of opinions. So where do they identify the pain points in housing, and where can we kind of improve or do better? And then working with MBIA. So it really is a holistic effort over the interim into that 90-day stretch. And there's nothing we love more than sharpening our pencils and working with good stakeholders like you and achieving better results for the state of Maryland.
Truly appreciate that. Yes. And I would even say in May, if memory serves, I don't know how much of a breather it is because that's right when ICSC and the Maryland Party is. Shout out to Howard Perlow and Residential and Commercial Title. They throw the Maryland Party every year in Vegas. And essentially, it's all the same stakeholders still having the same conversations and teeing up the next year. So there's a lot that goes into that 90-day session that I don't think folks truly know about.
If you're
What
going
are
to
your
do a bill right, it starts the day after Sine Die.
Yeah. So what are some other things? Because knowing what you don't know is empowering. What are some other things that you think the audience out there? We have over 300 subscribers on YouTube now. So what are your thoughts on what don't they know? What goes into a bill or what goes into some sort of legislation?
So a lot of it is kind of doing your homework up front, running the traps, talking with people very early. I would say a big thing that I like to do and that I ask people to do, if you're going to, introduce anything that's going to impact local governments, talk to folks earlier. And it's not only unique to local governments, any stakeholder. So the building industry, for example, or if you're
Mm.
doing, regulatory stuff on the environment, whoever's going to be impacted by that. 90 days is so short, and folks are going to come to the table and you're going to have a hearing and they're going to say the things you don't want to hear anyway. So like that collaboration early on goes a really long way.
No, that's smart. That's a pragmatic approach to it. Well, let me ask you this small pivot. You've been in the governmental space now for a while, right? How did you get started
Oh,
into government?
That's a great question. Couple of things. So if I used to be an elected official. I was actually the youngest elected official in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I was a borough
Oh.
council person, and if I could have run at 16, I would have. Unfortunately, that's illegal. So I ran for office at 18. I was a freshman I was a senior in college, or sorry, excuse me, I was a senior in high school when I won my primary. I was a freshman in college when I won my general election, and I just always had the bug. So did that for one term, 4 years, then went to Johns Hopkins and got my master's. While I was doing that, worked in 2020 on the presidential campaign, worked for Mike Bloomberg, Bloomies for Life. Somehow like landed in Montgomery County, Maryland, working for the county executive as a senior aide in his administration. Wasn't part of the plan, kind of landed there randomly. And then I asked the right person out to lunch because I was young and, looking for mentors and to build my network. They told me about a little organization called MACO, Maryland Association of Counties. That timing ended up right when they were actually hiring for their policy team. And I've been here for about 4 years since.
Man, that's fantastic. I love that windy road, and you're kind of seeing both sides of the tracks, right? From both a policymaker, but also as an elected official when you put that hat on, and you've been a part of it in a multitude of ways. So when you think of your career and that winding road that you've been on, and essentially we all have folks that open doors for us or speak our name in rooms that we don't know. Who's made the biggest impact on your career, and what did they do?
Oh, this is gonna be really cheesy, but I would have to say if I would boil it down, the biggest impact on my career is probably my mom. Just because
Awesome.
through the ups and the downs, she's always been a very frank sounding board, and sometimes says the things that I don't like to hear but need to hear, and is always there to cheer me on, when you need it, and is a shoulder to cry on. I think like my first campaign, like she was just so instrumental in helping organize and everything in my move from Pennsylvania to Maryland. And so I'm an only child to a single mom. And so like that relationship's really important. And even moving a state away, my mom has been super supportive. So I would say she's probably my number one throughout my whole career, my whole life.
Shout out to mom, because I can tell you that she has to have just a strong sense of will. Single moms, shout out to single moms. I promise you, they're the salt of the earth, because you can't wear all the hats and be the keystone and the bedrock for everyone. But for some reason, it's a way that they have that superpower. So that's
Amen.
awesome.
Amen.
That's awesome. So when you're thinking of your career and you're thinking of that support person for you, right, which is your mom, I see in the market today, a lot of folks don't know how to grow that mentorship mentee relationship, like you were mentioning earlier. What's a way that, if you wanted to give advice to those that are looking for, their divining rod or their mentor mentee relationship, what's a way to get started?
So great question. And this is actually one where I have a lot of experience. So like to go back to my early career, I graduated undergrad in May of 2019. Didn't get my first job. And by the way, graduated summa cum laude, had I was elected, was getting my master's at Johns Hopkins. I had a good resume. Couldn't get a job until like December at the Boy
Mm,
Scouts. And that wasn't there very long, wasn't a great fit. Hence the move to the Bloomberg campaign. But, and then after that, COVID hit. And so in grad school, trying to find a job. The reason I say this is because my career right now, if you look at the trajectory, it's like up and up and up and up and up. But what you don't see in that is there was a lot of struggle. To get
mm,
that job in Montgomery County, there was actually like 3 rounds. There are 3 different jobs I applied for, and it wasn't until the 3rd one that I actually got it. And so a couple of things, like if you're in your career, first, perseverance and don't take stuff personally. If you are out there, if your full-time job after college or even before college is applying for jobs, that's not you. That's the system, and keep going through it. So I remember very vividly, like Indeed and LinkedIn, I was 20 jobs a day, and I wish that I was exaggerating that.
mm.
The second thing is when you're looking for mentors and mentees, look for people that, have traits or have career pathways that you want to take. That's been very successful for me. Ask for people to hop on a Zoom meeting or go out for a cup of coffee. And the one thing that I don't think enough young folks kind of play on that is totally in their advantage is play on people's egos, because nothing really gets someone more involved or more interested if you say, you have this great career. I want to emulate you. I want to follow that path. Can I just pick your brain and can you tell me how? And just ask them, like, can you be
Yeah.
my mentor? Can you be my sounding board? Listen, my job is politics and influencing people, but kind of looking for that trajectory and then playing on those heartstrings. Usually people do want to reach back and help, and that's a good way to get the door open.
That's great advice. I think a lot of folks get intimidated, right, by success. They get intimidated by people, and we all have that skewed view of success because social media, everyone is successful on social media, right? And it's really difficult to understand that at one time they were struggling just like you were. And so they will more than likely see something in you if you do take that leap and make that approach. So I appreciate that insight. When when you look at what we have in the market today, there's a lot of things that are, and you kind of softly mentioned, obviously, the housing crisis and legislative session dealing with housing. What are some other things that are top of mind in this market that you see as something that we need to address, and we need to address it now?
Yeah, so I think the kind of connected to housing, but the other kind of big elephant in the room is going to be energy.
Mm,
Energy, both nationally, but also in our PJM region, which for those who aren't familiar, that's kind of our grid region of multiple states. It goes down North Carolina up to Pennsylvania, out to Illinois. Energy is a really big deal here, and then internationally as well, and kind of how we use energy, new technologies, et cetera. Energy was a central focus of the 2025 legislative session. There were three major bills, one of which that had to do with kind of renewable energy and solar. Mako was really involved with. There were two more bills that we were less so, but we're
mm,
not seeing the uptick in generation that we want to see, and we're not seeing prices come down. Yet demand is escalating, both through data centers, which is probably like the prime driver, but as well as just like naturally as we grow as a society, as technology comes, sometimes we get efficiency, sometimes we just get higher demand. And so if there's like one core thing that's probably impacting people's pocketbooks outside of the housing situation is, we need to generate more energy. I think that opens up a pretty big question, if I can say this is a twofer and unique to Maryland somewhat, but not really, is, we're a small state with really
mhm.
big goals. And for decades, we've been saying this is the goal and this is the goal and this is the priority. And we've kind of overbuilt ourselves up into a system where if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, and everything is
Right.
competing now. And so one of the big things from this past session was we were talking about in the energy front, we need to clarify, what should we go after and what should kind of take a back seat until we achieve this big thing. I think on the housing space, more energy as well, somewhat, but more on the housing space, we need that clarity from the General Assembly. And so I think that'll be a very interesting and somewhat difficult conversation that has to happen.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, so let's let's kind of talk about the energy crisis, right? And for folks right now in these economic uncertain times, uh, paying bills, getting rate increases. I think we had two this year, and there is likely going to be more coming up in the next year, right? What are some of the things that we're talking about that are going to help those families that are having real kitchen table talks and kitchen table conversations with their, how they make ends meet? From an energy standpoint, it sounds like renewables could be a form of generation. It's the one that we can move the needle the fastest when it's a solar situation. What are your thoughts on solving for that and providing folks, unlocking solar more in the market?
Yeah. So again, this is a really interesting and complex question. And just for some context for your listeners, I think you have to separate, especially just from my perspective. So there's county government in our role, but then there's the bigger picture and like bigger policy levers. So first I'll just lead with Some of the county stuff, I think, was kind of dealt with in 2025 with the Renewable Energy Certainty Act. And so that provided that clarity that I was talking about earlier. That being said, on the whole energy front, that doesn't mean we're done. That just solved one piece of the puzzle. And so we're in a really interesting situation right now where the situation in Washington is dynamic, you can say. And so, you've had one administration with stark energy policies. Now, as of this January, you have another administration that is pretty, juxtaposition, a total 180 different. And so when it comes to kind of solar and renewables, but energy policy generally, that opens up a lot of questions. And I think, one of the big things for builders is certainty. This has certainly brought in a lot of uncertainty. A lot of the federal incentives and everything else has been drawn back. And there's a question of, well, how much of that gap can Maryland fill? On the financial side, probably not that much, because if you're not following Maryland politics, surprise, our budget situation's, not great in the
Right.
foreseeable future. So to answer your question, like, what can we do? Some of this I'm not sure there's clear answers for. On the land use side of it, we've already have kind of that cleaning up and clarity. A lot of it's the finance side. You have a whole kind of issue with the PJM and something called the queue, which is basically when you get in line to get your projects approved. There's a lot of questions about transmission capacity and energy storage. So I mean, there's not a simple answer here. It's a complex soup of, you pull one lever, something else is going to happen. And, all I can say is thank God for job security, because we're not solving this anytime soon.
That's one way to look at it, for sure. Absolutely. I think that this is the sign of the times, right? And we've had previous conversations with elected officials, and they see it as a byproduct of, we wanted to move to full electrification, and we didn't have a grid to support it, right? And we didn't grow the support to that grid fast enough to get out ahead of the need, like you were saying earlier. And now we're stuck with this very difficult, very complex problem. And oh, by the way, the uncontrollable variables that you mentioned politically are at play as well. So I think that when we look at the years to come, energy and how we use energy is absolutely going to be at the forefront of every conversation. Do you agree with that?
100%. I think we're going to have a lot deeper conversations about things like, building energy performance standards, things like, we do have to, fight climate change, but, how soon can we actually retire plants? What plants are we going to direct incentives to? What's acceptable and not acceptable? And kind of rethinking what our like, for example, for solar, you brought up, how much is a priority of preservation? Are we going to say that we still value ag land just as much as we value megawatts? And if we're not, we're going to have that conversation. And what do those incentives on either end look like?
That's fair. That's fair. I appreciate you weighing in on this, because these are topics, right, that are on everyone's mind, from the housing side to the energy side. And I want to do something a little bit more poignant to a current event, right? The comptroller came out with a report that shows that Marylanders are leaving. They're leaving to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And, for the Virginia listeners that disagree with whose Commonwealth is better, the Virginia Commonwealth. So
they can be wrong. It's okay.
Two things can be the same. When you have people leaving because there's an affordability issue, right? It should raise some eyebrows, get some folks, especially elected officials, really leaning into how do we solve for this? What are your thoughts on some of the reasons why we haven't seen a large swing on how expensive it is to live in Maryland?
Yeah, so first I want to give a shout out to the comptroller's office, because they were very much in contact with us when they were developing that report. I think the whole process that they went about it was first class. And so there was a lot of stuff in the drafts that, we were able to give comments on, or clarifications or corrections. And I think the report was broadly fair. And the process for doing it, I think, was really fair. Some of the conclusions are really interesting. And so that kind of competing priorities thing was really the underlying theme of a lot of what the comptroller identified. For example, she brought up an example in Texas and looking at the timelines and the cost to develop in Texas versus in Maryland. Texas politically is, again, 180 different from Maryland, and the way they pull their policy levers and what are and aren't priorities in that state, are very different from us. And so I think we're going to have these bigger conversations of, do we start to look more like the states that don't regulate for the environment as much, or don't regulate for energy efficiency as much, or don't regulate for workers' rights and everything as much. I don't know how much of a taste there will be for that, but if we're going to compare ourselves and the growth to those states, that's a conversation that we're going to have. Where can we have efficiencies and what trade-offs, and do we want to emulate that, or is there a better way to go about it?
No, I appreciate that. Doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? And so I think that there is an opportunity for us to look at what's working for others and adapt it to the Maryland way. And I think that I look forward to the elected officials leaning into that. And obviously, I think the comptroller and other stakeholders are working on some bills for the session in alignment with that. So I can't wait to see those. So, right now we're in about 20-ish degrees today, I think, all over the East Coast. Everyone's gripping cold. This is going to air in December. It's going to be cold again, even then. For those of you that wanted to know, we're recording this on Veterans Day, right? So it's something that is an interesting time frame. We're a month almost away from real winter, but yet we're having a very wintry mix polar vortex gripping the East Coast, and it's only going to get worse. What are your thoughts on that climate, we'll say, uncertainty that we've been experiencing over the years? And is climate change one of those things that's a contributor? Has things changed?
Yeah, so I think, the broad conversation on climate is really interesting. From a county perspective, we really are where the rubber meets the road. So the moment you see sea level rise or a flood or some type of natural disaster or heat that, historically was a natural disaster, but now it's an everyday occurrence, the response to all of that is fundamentally at the local level, and we'll be feeling it first. So this whole conversation is really interesting. I think the debate of, how do we kind of grow in a climate friendly way when we have competing states that are not growing in a climate friendly way and are now taking our economic opportunity? I think that will be a really interesting and deep debate that we're going to probably start to have this year, and have, in the odd years continuously, to kind of bring it back to housing. I think one of the things that'll be really interesting is when you're seeing states like California, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, that are having issues in the insurance market. Maryland, we have
Right.
one of the largest coastlines in the country. That's a niche issue people aren't really thinking about. How will that start to play out as storms get worse, as sea level rise, as erosion and everything? So there's a lot of strings we can pull on this. And I think, it's going to be probably the big thing in the background that's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that insight. And it's something to look for, when we start looking for ways to grow and how we're growing. You hit the nail on the head. Those uninsurable markets, they're if you want to talk about affordability, that is a affordability nightmare for folks in that uninsurable market. So that's great insight. Well, I could talk to you for hours, Dom. I appreciate you truly for your time. If someone wanted to get in contact with you, to get involved with the Maryland Association of Counties, or to do any type of kind of listening tour with what you all are working on, how could they do that?
Yeah, so if you just look up Mako online, we have the Conduit Street blog and our own Conduit Street podcast. I will say we record on Zoom. It's nowhere near as fancy as this outfit you have, so I love it. But yeah, Conduit Street blog, that's probably the best way to kind of follow, what's going on in county land, what the priorities are, et cetera. And then the podcast, we do a weekly podcast. We kind of dig into what the issues are. We have a lot of interesting people. Bobby, I'm sure we got to get you on there soon, a little mutual
I
back and
love it.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah,
So now you have to share that link so everyone can listen to that episode part 2. But yeah, those are probably
absolutely.
the best ways.
Okay, so folks, you heard it here. Make sure that you get involved. You can't say that something's not right if you're not willing to get involved. So get involved, reach out, follow the blog, listen to the podcast, and stay active out here. All right. Well, Dom, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would love the folks to know?
Oh, I mean, if we did that, this podcast would go on for 8 hours. So I will say thank you very much for having me on. This was a great conversation.
I appreciate your time, Dom, and I look forward to having another conversation with you soon. Thank you.
Sir.
All right, folks. So again, fast and furious as we go, I will tell you that everyone wants to get more involved. They want your voices heard. They want to move things forward with your voice being heard. So you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your families. Get involved. Let your voices be heard. Let those elected officials that represent you know what your thoughts are, so that way they can act upon them. All right. So again, I appreciate everyone supporting. Like, share, comment, and we are still offering fundraiser and sponsorships and opportunities throughout time. So until next time, we'll see you in the built world around you. Thank you for listening to the built world around you. If today's conversation gave you new insights or sparked fresh ideas, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps more builders, leaders, and innovators join the conversation. Until next time, keep building smarter, leading stronger, and shaping the world around you.